One of the things we were talking about last time is the fundamental attribution error. This is fairly common. He gets men in trouble all the time because they think that women are always flirting with them, despite the fact that how in the world is she supposed to act and not show him that, or to show him that she has no interest in him. I mean, she could tell him and he still doesn't believe her. So men are fairly deluded. A lot of men are fairly deluded. Of course, that's the common man. The very attractive man, of course, is the opposite. He has a difficult time telling if she is... He ignores women that seem to be interested in them. I guess it's a defense mechanism. My son's really good looking, and when he was working in the bar, women used to flirt with him all the time, and it just went right over his head, or at least he ignored it. They'd give him their telephone numbers, and he would never call them, of course. He's just a weird kid, I guess. Anyway, that's a fundamental attribution error. When trying to explain our own behavior, we tend to attribute behavior to situations. I was angry because everything was going wrong, so I was angry. It was very logical. But when we try to explain other people's behavior, it's the opposite. We just assume that they are the way that they act. Their personality is the way that they act. As strange as that is. Voters come to like just elected candidates. It's called the honeymoon period. Obama didn't have a honeymoon period, neither did Trump. I don't know if this is the way things are going to be in the future, but neither one of those guys got a honeymoon period. A contestant that wins something, they will value that prize, even if they don't want it. They think it's very important in the beginning. Later on, of course, they can see it for what it is. People develop an instant liking for those that they're about to meet. They assume that everything is going to be better, and that's the way it works. When Germaine goes to parties, he is always amazed at how easily everyone melds with each other. He always feels shy and tense, of course. He knows how he feels. He has no clue how anybody else feels. The reality probably is that everybody feels about the same as he does, despite the fact that he doesn't understand. And I don't know which one of these is supposed to be Germaine. I don't know if it's supposed to be him or him, but
one of them.
It is an interesting, it's an interesting picture. Researchers have known for decades that there's a difference between the perspective of being an actor in an event and an observer in that event. And for this reason, if we have an individual that is an eyewitness to something, a lot of times their eyewitness account will be totally different. And this is the reason why the police always question everybody. They're trying to get a complete picture of what happened. What I saw was from my perspective. My perspective may have been, geez, I hope I don't get shot. I see anybody with a gun and it spooks me out. Mainly because I don't trust people with guns. Maybe I don't trust people with guns. When I was in the military, we were over in Germany, and we were on an Air Force base, and right beside the Air Force base was an Army post. It was a missile site, and the guys, it was on top of a mountain, and these guys would go out there for, 3 or 4 days at a clip. And in the beginning they were okay, the first couple days they were okay, but then they got a little stir crazy, and they'd start shooting at each other, playing strange games. It was odd to see how close they could come to somebody. Sometimes they'd hit each other, which meant that, of course, they would have a bullet wound, and of course we would have to treat them. And I always thought it was kind of silly, all these Army guys shooting at each other, or shooting each other. I mean, they're shooting each other with In the beginning, they were using BB guns and they were using pellet guns. But then they started using their M16s, which I thought was just the dumbest thing in the world. You don't have to hit somebody with an M16 to do damage. If you come really close, then it will cause vascular damage. That's how stupid these guys were. But they kept shooting each other. Well, the other thing was that if they shot each other, if they got shot, then they didn't have to pull that duty anymore. Of course, they usually lost a stripe. Sometimes they got wounded so well that they boarded them out. They medically boarded them out of the service. Anyway, okay. So you never know what you're getting, unless you're a movie producer and get to produce the entire scene. Then probably you have no clue what's going on. Even if you look at a film of something that happened, and of course we see these all the time, but usually they tell us what's going to happen before it happens. And so we're looking for what they told us is there. If we were just looking at that video, then potentially we wouldn't see what they told us, what is actually there, because we'd be looking at something else. This is very common. This is known as perceptual salience. When we're the actor in the environment around us, it commands our attention, of course. The environment commands our attention. When we watch an event, we watch the actor in the event, and the environment becomes less visible. And we're not really paying attention to the environment around somebody. Last night, what were they showing on television last night? Oh, somebody in a gray BMW drove past a guy. It was road rage, I guess. He drove past the guy and he shot him in the face as he was going past. So they kept showing the picture of this gray BMW passing this darker car. Of course, they told us that the guy in the car was shot. We didn't see the shot. All we saw was the gray car passing the darker car. And they asked us, if you see this car, then you need to call the hotline. Thus, the person we see as the focus is always the cause, and this is known as perceptual salience. So that's whoever you're focusing on. That's the individual that was the perpetrator. Celeste was working undercover with the meth suppliers in Gallup. Word got back to her that her cover was blown. As she walked past Smokey's Roadhouse on her way to her pickup, she heard a speeding car behind her. She turned and drew her pistol. She caught sight of a man sticking a rifle out the window and fired just as the car swerved into oncoming traffic. It's a true story.
It's crazy.
All right. As Mary pulled out of the gas max across the street from Smokey's, she saw a woman draw a gun, wheel around toward traffic, and fire indiscriminately at a car trying to get out of the way. The car plowed into oncoming traffic. When questioned on the witness stand, she did not see the rifle or perceive the car as speeding. So Mary saw things completely different, because she saw a woman pull a gun, and of course she was focused on the woman with the gun for two reasons. One, well, that was what she was looking at for one thing, but the other thing was that she may have been scared that the lady might start blasting away at her. So she kept her eye on the lady. She didn't see anything else. The environment completely changed for her. Celeste, of course, knew what was going on. So Celeste is the undercover cop, and she saw the car, she saw the rifle, she recognized the vehicle. Probably Mary couldn't even describe the vehicle. Couldn't even tell you what color it was. It was dark. It was light. It was gray. It was silver. Most cars are gray and silver these days, for some reason. One of the most persistent fundamental attribution errors around the world is the perception of poverty. This is a problem that we're having on the southern border. These individuals that are coming up in caravans from South and Central America, not South America, but Central America and Mexico, these individuals feel like they need to leave the area that they're in. They live in poverty wherever they are. I don't know how in the world they ever make it up to the United States border. But this is a problem. Some people feel sympathetically toward these individuals. Other individuals don't. Some people just want to send them back home. And sometimes we do. We send them back home. People who attribute poverty and unemployment to personal dispositions, they're lazy and they're undeserving, tend to adopt political positions unsympathetic to such people. And if you listen to the debates, this is what we hear. These people just want to come into the United States and go on welfare and get free stuff. Other individuals are saying, no, these are some of the hardest working people in the United States. We've always been a nation of immigrants. Well, since 1492, we've been, okay, since 1492, we've been a nation of immigrants. And the immigrants have always provided the labor and the drive that has made us successful. So we've got two different perspectives. One side is saying we need to build a wall because all these lazy people want to come in and go on welfare. And, well, actually, he's also saying that, what is he saying? That there's drugs coming across. Evidently, they all wear clothes that have lots of drugs on them or something. Anyway, he doesn't want them to come across. And they're all criminals. They're rapists, they're murderers. And we've heard that story as well. People sympathetic to the plight tend to attribute poverty to external attributions, so they see these people as potential workers. Attribution is usually a two-step process. When something happens to us involving someone else, our first instinct is to detect an internal attribution. This is what happened with the shooter in Aurora. I don't know if you were listening to what was going on Friday, but in the afternoon, this guy got fired, pulled out a gun and started blasting away. It had a targeting laser on it. I know. It had a targeting laser on it, so he was able to see exactly where he was shooting. It was kind of interesting because he killed. He shot 11 people. He shot 11 people. He wounded 6 of them, but the first 5 people that he shot, he killed them. Then he wounded one person who was moving away from him, and then the police engaged him, and he shot 5 policemen. He didn't kill any of the policemen, but he shot them. But of course he was hiding and he was ducking and whatnot, so his aim wasn't quite as good with the policemen as it was with the unarmed people that he was blasting away. Anyway, he killed 5 out of 6 civilians, and he wounded 5 policemen. Why is this important? Oh, so we want to know why. Why did this guy open fire? There were a couple things about this guy. One of them was that he wasn't white. Most of the mass shooters that we have seen have been white guys with a gun. Most dangerous thing in the world. I'm the most dangerous person on this campus. No, I'm not. I don't have a gun. I'm still dangerous. Aren't you scared? No. It used to be that only middle-aged white guys were shooting people, but now, of course, it's that since that guy in Las Vegas, even us old farts are blasting away. So you're not safe yet, not until, well, I'm 70, so I guess you're pretty safe. He was 63, so maybe that's a cutoff date. Anything over 63, you're okay. Just a thought. Anyway, we tried to figure out what was going on. We tried to figure out what was going on with the guy in Las Vegas. We have no clue. We don't know what his motivation was. Why in the world did he open fire on a concert with 10,000 people in it? Why did he do that? That's what we want to know. But we have no answers. But we want to know what's going on with this guy, or what's going on with this guy, and why he had a gun. He had a gun, and he had it illegally. They were supposed to have confiscated it. Actually, the laws in Illinois tell the police that he's supposed to turn it in because they told him to. And he didn't. And nobody followed up on it. So he wasn't supposed to have a gun. So why did he open fire? I know this scares you. Why did he open fire? They fired him. And that upset him. So he started killing people. We're looking for an internal attribution. We don't know why the kid in Parkland opened fire on his former classmates. Or his former schoolmates. He had already graduated from high school. Why did he do that? Kill 17 people. That's a lot of people. What's the internal motivation? What's the internal attribution? Hopefully we are open-minded enough to reevaluate our initial response and possibly adjust our initial reaction. Some people may have looked at a picture of the individual that opened fire on the people in Aurora, Illinois, and thought, oh, black people are dangerous. We know that. Everybody knows that. But hopefully they're not thinking, well, all black people are dangerous, especially the ones that shaved their head. He didn't have any hair. Hopefully they have rethought that idea that he was dangerous because he was black. It probably, well, now we have an internal cause. The guy was fired. He had anger issues. He had assaulted a girlfriend, had attacked her actually 3 times, had stabbed her with a knife at one point. So he had served 3 years in prison for criminal assault. And he wasn't supposed to have a weapon, but the system broke down, and the people in Illinois issued him a concealed carry license, and then finally they pulled it after he was trying to do something else. He was able to buy a gun, but then when he applied for a concealed carry license, his conviction in Mississippi, they actually found it, and then they told him that he had to turn the gun in. But instead of going to his house and saying, give me your gun and give me your license, they just waited for him to come in and turn his own gun in, which didn't happen. Adjustment, however, requires effort and conscious attention. It doesn't always happen, of course, so there are probably still some people out there going, he's bad because he was black. That's why he opened fire on those nice, wonderful white people. We take personal credit for all of our successes. We blame our failures on someone else. So if you guys flunked this class, we all 3 know exactly whose fault that is. Obviously, it's my fault, since you guys never make mistakes. Okay. If you passed the class, I didn't have anything to do with it. My teaching style had nothing to do with it. Okay. Well, hopefully you think that you were the cause, not the fact that the class is so easy. One domain in which self-serving biases may be particularly common is the world of sports, especially among solo athletes for whom the entire weight of winning or losing rests on their shoulders, like archery. You either hit the middle of the target or you don't, and whose fault is it if you don't? You can't blame it on you can't blame it on anybody else. The wind was blowing, there was a baby crying in the stands, I don't know. To maintain their own egos, they must find someone else to blame for their failures. And for this reason, a lot of times when you have a young tennis player, their father is their coach, and this works for a while, and then when they become adults, a lot of times they fire their dad. They fire him because if they fail, they have nobody to blame except themselves. So they will fire, they will, of course these are relatively young people, they're teenagers, they're young adults, their brains aren't completely mature yet, so at some point they usually fire their father. Pete Sampras, I mean the list is as long as the people playing tennis. They always fire their father. One form of defensive attribution is to believe that bad things happen only to bad people who make stupid mistakes or poor choices. Therefore, bad things won't happen to us because we won't be stupid or careless. Since we're not stupid or careless, we'll never have an automobile accident. We'll never have to worry about being shot by a disgruntled employee. Melvin Lerner called this the disbelief in a just world, the assumption that people are what they deserve and deserve what they get. This is known as the just world phenomenon. Only bad people suffer. Now this gets a little strange because let's pretend that I have lots of money. I don't, but if I did, well, if I had lots of money, whose fault would that be? No matter where I got the money. Donald Trump is a self-made man, is that correct? No, his dad gave him, I don't know, $1 million to buy a building at some point. And in today's money, it was like $42 million. I'm not attacking Donald. Yes, I am. I'm attacking Donald Trump. There are good things and bad things about this the just world beliefs. It helps people deal with feelings of vulnerability and mortality. If you don't at least think about these things, then potentially you won't try to protect yourself, or you won't protect yourself properly. But unfortunately, it often leads to blaming the victim. Rape victims and battered wives, poor people, immigrants. It leads to that type of justification. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the United States that have these ideas. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the United States that don't have a whole lot of education. And the degree of education that they have comes from their high school class, which they weren't listening half the time anyway. But they got all their politics or political ideas from those high school classes, high school civics class or high school government class. Well, things have changed since they were in high school. A lot of things have changed since they were in high school. They didn't listen anyway. They just picked out whatever they wanted to. So they've got these really strange patriotic ideas, or what they consider patriotic, but they are incomplete thoughts. So they tend to blame the victim, they blame the person that's seeking asylum coming to the United States border. It must be their fault. Has to be their fault. So, well, okay. We won't talk about the rape victims in the caravans. When we think of our own attributional biases and other people's biases, we feel, or we know, that other people have more biases than we do. And this is known as bias blind spot. Everybody else is more biased than I am. I just showed you an example. I was talking about those people that aren't very well educated and they still think they're back in high school, or the world is the same as their high school civics teacher told them. Everybody else is more biased than I am. Western culture is holistic and fosters holistic thinking about properties of objects, properties of people, individual autonomy, Judeo-Christian belief in an individual soul. They pay less attention to situation and context. So we look at the world. We look at the world as if we were studying a forest, but we're not looking at the entire forest. We're just looking at individual trees. That's a maple. That's an ash. That's a walnut tree. That's a lodgepole pine. That's pinyon. Okay, but we're not looking at the entire forest. And of course, global warming has a lot to do with this. So Trump's sitting in Washington, D.C., and a cold snap blasts through Washington, D.C., and he tweets something about global warming sure seems to be messing up all of a sudden. I wish it would warm up right now. That kind of stupid stuff. Why? Because he only sees what he wants to see. He only sees what's right in front of him. He doesn't look at the world globally. He doesn't recognize the fact that the glaciers are disappearing. That Antarctica, all the ice in Antarctica and the Arctic are dissipating. Values in Eastern cultures foster analytic thinking. Eastern thinking focuses on objects or persons and the surrounding context and relationships between them. So they try to read context. They try to read the environment. We just look at individual things. So when somebody pulls out a gun and shoots 5 people, and shoots and kills 5 people in Asia, they look at the context. They look at the environment, and they don't look at the individual and try to figure out what was going on inside the guy's brain. They don't think, well, he was a disgruntled employee. They say there's a problem with with the world. He was living in a bad neighborhood. Those kinds of things. But they don't look at what his motivation was. It's not as important. While members of individualistic cultures prefer dispositional attributions and think like personality psychologists, members of collectivistic cultures prefer situational explanations and think like social psychologists. So in an individualistic environment, in an individualistic culture, those individuals will try to figure out why he was mentally ill, what the problem was. But in a collectivistic culture, they will try to figure out why society did this to this individual. That's a social psychologist. Greater situational focus is a matter of degree, of course. So there's a difference between social psychologists and personality psychologists. There's a difference between all the different types of psychologists. We have different focuses. I was in a meeting the other day, and I made a statement, and Sarah was on the phone, and Sarah refuted everything that I said, and she admitted that the two of us have different worldviews. She's a cognitive psychologist, and I'm a general psychologist. I teach social psychology. She doesn't teach social psychology. I teach counseling, and she teaches research, Okay. So she has a different perspective than I do, which she admitted. I've been telling her this for years. For 3 years. It was interesting. So she finally said it. We have different worldviews. Okay. It was funny. Self-serving bias, the other thing was she'd just come on the phone, and I was disagreeing with like everybody else in the room was what was going on. And then she came onto the phone, and she disagreed with me, but she was agreeing with everybody else in the room, but she didn't realize everybody else in the room had already, she'd just come on the phone. So she didn't realize she was agreeing with everybody else. She thought I was changing everybody's mind or something. Self-serving bias, more prevalent in Western and individualistic cultures than the Eastern and collectivistic cultures. Self-serving bias, making excuses for what happens to you. Explanations of Olympic gold success. Reporters discuss success in terms of unique talent in the United States, but incorporated role of others in Japan. In Japan, it's in the United States. I won because I'm such a wonderful person, and I have a great personality. In Japan, they say I have a wonderful family that supports me, and my coach is really, really good. It's not because my legs are 3 feet longer than everybody else's. It's because I had such good coaching, and my family allowed me to do this. Failure in East and West, make attributions to external causes in the United States, but internal causes in China. And this is one of the reasons, if we've talked about the tiger mom in other classes. The tiger mom in China is, nothing's ever good enough for this select individual. But in the United States, of course, if I fail, it's because somebody else has made me fail. It's not because of me. Are you okay?
Oh, I had a migraine this morning.
That's not good.
Yeah.
I thought we figured out how to stay away from that.
I just woke up with it.
Oh, okay.
So,
It didn't have anything to do with eating.
I just woke up with the aura. And I got to school, because it's like my only ride with my husband.
Do you wanna sit in that chair?
Mm-mm.
You sure? It's a little softer.
I had to like expel the block bile, I guess. Yeah. So I just, right before I got here. So I took some medicine, some ibuprofen, because right now my vessels are really, right? They're open. Now
Well, they were closed. and
they're
that's why you
closed. I thought they were.
No, they're constricted, and that's why you have the migraine headache.
Oh,
And then now we need to open them up.
yeah. So it's starting to work.
The only way to do that is to relax, of course. That's why I was thinking the other chair. You want to try it?
No.
Self-critical attributions hold groups together in some Asian cultures. They will get together and they will tell each other why they're not being successful, which is always fun. It's kind of like attack. Everybody attacks the same guy. Belief in a just world is more prevalent in cultures with extreme differences in wealth. And of course, in the United States, we've had this problem, especially since the last tax cut, which seems to have helped the very wealthy people and corporations. We'll see what happens with that. And that's the end of chapter whatever. Wait a minute. 4. So we'll start on chapter 5. I'm only a chapter behind, and that's not too bad. For some reason, I'm going slow. So we were talking about people looking at groups of other people. Now we'll look at how we feel about ourselves in the world, how we see ourselves. There's a subtle connection between what is happening in the world around us and what's going on in our heads. There is a difference between us and what we see is happening. Social surroundings tend to affect self-awareness, depending on where you live. I live in Hogan housing. I've got Ken Losi living right next to me. I've got Marius Begay right around the corner. He's right there. Ed Curtis used to live, it's a duplex, and he was in the other side of the duplex, but his water main broke last year. Anyway, that's where I live. And Robert Bearclough lives, is in the duplex with Ken Losi. But, I mean, that's the environment that I live in. Dogs all over the place, just all over the place. Yeah. Herman, Dr. Herman, whatever, the librarian. His dog's at my house all the time. Big red hound dog. His name's Clay. Just will not leave my dogs alone. Sometimes he climbs over my fence and comes in my house. He's terrible. Anyway, that's the world that I live in. Depending on who we are and where we are, each individual is aware of the differences between themselves and everyone else. And of course, it's very easy for me to see the difference between me and my students, the people that live around me. Ken and Robert and I are the only white people in the area. That's different. Should we see ourselves as the same?
And they just grouped you together?
I think it just turned out that way. Maybe they did. You know, Don Robinson used to live right next to me. And then they moved him up the hill, but then they moved Ken in. You know, it's really hard to say. I don't think so. I don't think they meant to do it that way. Sarah used to live in right next door, the pod next door. I think she was the only white family, or she was the only white person living there. Everybody else is native. And then in the one on top of the hill, it's all white people. That's Margaret and, well, Debbie Robinson. She's black. It's all non-natives. How's that? But then Barcine lives around, up on another loop. Barcine lives up there, and Don lives up there, and James Denny. Okay. And then there's another native family living here. I don't know, there's a lot of the instructors at this institution are white. You may have noticed that. Or maybe not. Well, think about it. I mean, in psychology we have 3 white people and one native person. Right? Well, she's over in
She's
Shiprock.
Or,
Marlincia Chi. Yeah. In business almost everybody's.
Christine Avi she's Native American.
Yeah, but she only teaches a couple classes. Anyway, trying to figure this out. In the business department, which is we're partnered with now, James Denny is the only non-native. Patrick, Rosalind.
James Denny was my first instructor here. I was in the business program.
How come there's no Anglos teaching the study classes?
Stupid.
Oh, you think that's funny? I used to teach up in Montana, and in Montana, almost all the people teaching American Indian or not Dene studies, of course, but Native American studies classes are white. As stupid as that sounds, not at Fort Belknap. Fort Belknap is a tribal college, but right next door is Northern Montana University, MSUN, Montana State University of Northern, in Havre, and the guy teaching Native American Studies classes is from Finland. He's Finnish. At University of Montana Billings, the guy teaching Native American Studies is a Jewish guy from New York City.
I know a lot of people who graduated from OU in their American Indian Studies program. I know about 8 of them. Out of all of them, none of them are teaching. They're all working in different facets. They're,
Oh, is that
they're
right?
working in education, or for the tribe, but they're not actually teaching.
This drives me nuts. I don't know why Europeans are so fascinated with American Indians. It's just bizarre.
You know what I think it is?
What?
The term people like to use, the contemporary term that people like to use nowadays is indigenous.
Yeah. Indigenous peoples.
Indigenous for a pan, I guess, movement or idea
There you go.
of different tribes. It's more inclusive, but I think people forget that Anglos were indigenous at one point too. Before the Romans came with the sword, Germans had their own language, they used arrowheads,
Sure.
they had their own ceremonies,
Yeah.
even all the way in England. In fact, there's still some resentment in North England. They don't like the Southern English that colonized them.
Sure.
You know, and then I think the last group of Anglos that got colonized were the Irish. They had their own
The
ways,
Celts,
they had their
yeah.
own clans, they had their own family organization, their own culture, their own religion. And then they got colonized, and it just kind of kept on coming this way. And I think so.
Yeah.
I think there's something, some people, maybe in here somewhere,
They feel like they're indigenous.
yeah, I think it speaks to their, they recognize their own ancestors.
Right.
I think it's something that even Navajos will say, even Indians will say that. Like if you hear a song, it's always a sentiment that it's somewhere it's your ancestors trying to talk to you, they're trying to reconnect with you. So
Okay.
it happens even at another level. Here for us, we still have a connection, but I think it still happens to other groups of people who have been colonized.
Trying to
somewhere
find
inside.
that self-identity within themselves, like who they are.
yeah, that connection to who you
That-
are, where they come
I
from.
think that's how I was like, I was studying Hopi culture. And I didn't know anything about my language or my own ceremonies, but I was already learning about the Hopis and like, they're so fascinating. Same with the Zunis and
Sure.
the Apaches, like it's so like I was saying that they're very nice people, but then here, like I'm a Navajo woman, and I have a language, I have a culture, I have the same thing that they have, I have it. So I finally like realized like, shoot, I need to
Learn about
learn
your
it. Yeah. I was even learning about people from Africa, like their tribes and like how they conduct. I don't know, it was just
It goes to that question, who am I?
yeah. And then when I came
What am I
here
doing
in 2016, I finally realized who I am. So
That's, well, you have to understand that all other tribes feel exactly the same way you guys. They want to learn about themselves.
I think it goes, no, I'm not gonna say the way exactly, it's like Carl Jung, I read some stuff about him, talking about how when you don't like something in someone, it's because you recognize something in yourself that you don't like.
That's Jung, all right.
Yeah, and so I think it's the same thing as with, I think the converse holds true too, the flip side of that coin.
When you
If they're seeing something that you really like, it's something that you
Sure.
that you see in yourself, or you want in yourself, or you want to aspire to, so, or in the case of people who've been colonized, you want to go back to who they were,
Right.
you know, and when they see other people who still have a little of what they have. I even see it with the Irish people, really admire, other people in the Irish communities will really admire people who can still speak their language,
Sure.
people who come from
Sure.
there, you know, and they really have a connection. They look up to those other people who do that. So I think it's Carl Jung probably
Right.
expressed it the best, I think, so far. There's my thought on it.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the Irish are a good example. Of course, the Irish have always been very rebellious against the English. England it's a bastard language, it's a bastard group of people. They were, different sections of England, and they all came together, and then they became Great Britain. Then they captured all these other areas and brought everybody else in, and now they have lost their understanding of who they were or who they are. I'm a Yorkshire man, I'm Welsh, all these other things. They're losing this concept of who they are. So potentially you're right.
it goes back to that social surroundings tend to affect self-awareness.
Exactly.
And I think that played out here in the States. Because when North America was first being colonized by these different groups and countries, everybody had their own self-identity
Sure.
and their own language and their own accent,
Right.
and then,
Yeah. And everybody was ghettoized. They would, and actually this went on until the 20th century. If you wandered around the United States, you would go in, and you went from one village to the next. One would be a Swedish village, the next would be Norwegian, the next would be French. I mean, it's that way in Kansas and Nebraska, places where all these people were farmers, but they were farmers around each other, the people that they were the most comfortable with. And so they developed these Swedish and Norwegian and German and whatnot. They, villages that were specific to that group. And you can still find this in Nebraska. I was up for a teaching job in Stromsburg, the Swedish capital of Nebraska. And I didn't get the job despite the fact that the person that they hired didn't have the same expertise that I did, because I wasn't Swedish and I wouldn't have understood their culture. Not real bright. It's kind of sad, but I'm so stupid. I couldn't understand Swedish culture. Self-interest colors our social judgment. People tend not to be objective or dispassionate when they're dealing with a situation that they're involved in. Self-concern motivates social behavior. People do things for their own selves. and often function to please or impress society at large. And of course, yes, ma'am.
Have you ever reconnected to where you came from, or have an idea of where you come from?
My people have been here for about 400 years. So,
How before that?
well, before that they were English, French, German, and Belgian. I've been to Germany. I've been to England. I've been to France.
Did I feel a connection with those people? No. And I've told you this before. My family, I looked at my DNA, and my family seems to have married, their next door neighbor. All my ancestors are either French, German, or English. My son, he had his DNA checked. Of course, half of his DNA is mine, but his other half is his mother's, and his mother told him that she had native ancestry. And he looked at his DNA and he found out that it wasn't native at all. It was Italian. So some people, I don't know. If you look at pictures of my family all the way back, we all have the same color hair. Everybody's got the same color hair. And it's all brown. So it's brown hair. No black hair. No blonde hair. As children, we have blonde hair. Then as we grow older, it turns brown. And everybody seems to have exactly the same thing. Isn't that bizarre?
Have you done the DNA thing?
I did it for a history class once in the school I was attending. But half the class did it wrong. The swab.
Oh, okay.
It was for the History Channel.
Sure.
And our instructor actually researched all the different DNA models. And that's when I found out that some of them, they're just kind of guessing where you're from, according to models where they think your DNA should
Sure.
belong.
Right.
The most accurate one that he found was the History Channel. They actually went out and went to different communities all over the world.
Right.
And took samples for baseline.
Sure.
The other ones were just projecting where you should have
Right.
come from underneath it. So that's when he wanted us to try it. And mine came out with one of the batches that something went wrong. So I was really, I actually now want, when I see these 23 ancestry, I always want to try it.
All you have to do is spit in the bottle. I mean, it's not that hard.
But then it goes back to our culture of teaching, what if it comes back and you're not Native American?
Well, our family, got my mom and my dad's side, right? My mom's side we're Tohiatlini clan, and we can trace our lineage all the way back to where we came into the Navajo clan, all Navajo. On this side of my dad's side, there's a part that there might be some Irish. There's some stories where they think one of the great-great-grandchildren that was fathered might have been fathered by an Irishman. So there's some, I don't know.
Denny's an Irish name.
Well, actually, Denny's comes from my great-grandfather's name was Deneyaja.
Ah.
He sent his two kids to school. One was William Denny Sr., which is my dad's dad,
Right.
and the other one was Alan Yazzie. They were both sons of Deneyaja, but when they got to Kings Canyon boarding school, they wrote it down as Denny Yazzie instead of Deneyaja. And they said, that's too long, we're going to give one of you Denny and we're going to give one of you Yazzie. And
They split them.
then what happened worse was, they said Kings Canyon boarding school, my great-great-grandfather dropped his kids off. He said, I'll be back for them to check on them in a couple of weeks. He comes back and he finds out that they said that the boarding school had got full, so they shipped off the kids to different boarding schools.
no.
And I guess they tried to stay together, but one got sent to California, and then the other one got sent to Oklahoma.
For Sil?
Yeah, I don't know, I can't remember, I gotta ask my dad, but,
Yeah.
so they got split, and they weren't gonna see them again until the end of the school year.
Yeah.
And they would come back for the summer, so when they came back, my great-grandfather, I guess he told the school, I'm taking one home. Just you guys, I don't know where my kids are gonna end up at.
Right.
I'm keeping one, I'll give one of
Sure.
them to school, and one of them will stay here with me. And so my dad's dad was the one that went home. My grandfather went home with and he became a medicine man. The other son didn't come back again until he finished high school. We didn't see him, he wasn't seen again until he graduated high school and came home. And by that point, he had really been changed, you know?
Forced assimilation.
Yeah, so, but he went to University of Arizona and he became a doctor. And actually, he was one of the founders of the starting the idea of the impossible dream to start he was one of the founders for DODE, the Navajo Department of Education.
Mhm.
And one of the founders for Diné College, the original people who said we should have our
cool.
own school. So his name was Alan Yazzie. And,
Though he was all, he was related.
well, actually, yeah, when he came back, when they started talking about putting together a Navajo curriculum,
Uh-huh.
Ruth Russell and Bob Russell,
Yeah.
the husband is Vilgana, he's white, he married a Navajo lady, Ruth. They actually taught at Low Mountain, which is around the corner from where my dad is from.
Uh-huh.
So they got to know one another, the families out
Yeah.
there. And they knew from my grandfather was a medicine man. And then they knew that one of his sons was college educated. And they all got together to put together the curriculum that's taught here in the college now. They put it together, they used it at, actually it was first used at Wichita Boarding School.
Right.
And then from there it was taken to Rough Rock where it really kind of grew further. And then that's what was brought into NCC, or Navajo Community College, which became Diné College. They tried to look for land all over. They couldn't find a community willing to give up land.
Oh, is
Say
that
it
right?
was in the middle of nowhere. And the reason Navajo education got started in Wichita was they planted a tree when they came back from the long walk. And they said, "We see this." They did a prayer. They planted a tree, and they said, "If this tree grows, then that's going to be our indication that this Western education is good for our kids." And it took root and grew. That's in Wichita Boarding School. So they came back to this area looking, and one of the people, landowners, lived right over the corner here. He was
Sure.
Charlie Benali, or Charlie Benali. He was a medicine man too. They talked and they got together on this land area right here. And they said, "We'll donate this, and so we can put a school here for our kids to learn our own, how to do it our own way."
Right.
So it's kind of a little bit of my family history.
Wow.
And then my dad teaches here now too. So
There you go.
Is that tree still up?
No, actually got struck by lightning.
Uh-oh.
I
don't know what that
mean?
means.
What does that mean?
Years later, there's a whole other story to that one again. I got struck by lightning years later.
Oh my
It's kind of
goodness.
scary. I was all,
Maybe I shouldn't be here.
oh my god.
But the original Diné College was at mini farms. They were in trailers
Oh, really?
at the Chinle Boarding School, which was in mini farms.
Mhm.
And Wilson Ronald was working there on a ranch with horses. And some of the students were over there with him, and he was a really young guy, you know, in his 20s. And he was talking about explaining the horse to some Navajo
Uh-huh.
students, some of the students from the college. They came over from the classroom, and he was talking to them about how the horse was from a Diné perspective, and then the songs that go with it. And somehow that got back to the faculty. They said, "There's a guy over there who knows about the horse songs. We're talking about Navajo culture, but there's a guy out there who
Yeah.
actually knows it." So they brought him in, president of this Navajo Community College. I said, and he said, "Do you know these stories?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you know the songs?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Where did you learn it?" He said, "I just grew up with it. My mom,
Yeah.
or actually my grandmother." So they asked him, "Do you want a job to teach?" We're looking for a Navajo community. They had no Navajo to teach Navajo cultures. Go back
A
to
guy from Finland. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who was teaching Navajo culture at that point. It could have been in Bulagana.
Yeah, it could probably.
Oh my
And so then that's how Wilson got involved in Navajo Community College, and then eventually got moved up here.
Yeah, when I went to Vegas, there's a Bilagana guy giving me a history lesson about my own culture, and he got mixed up between the Long Walk and the other one. What was it?
Trail of
Trail of
Tears.
Tears.
Trail of Tears. So he was talking about, oh, I can't believe your ancestors went through the Trail of Tears, and like,
Wow.
I just like let him
Where
talk.
the hell do you think we
and
came from?
I just let him talk, and he's like, yeah, I have a doctor's degree, and I'm just like, I can't argue with people who have,
PhDs?
yeah, they just won't.
Sometimes it blinds you to other information. So let's pretend I don't have that problem.
And you know what you're talking about, being getting blinded, and what we're talking about on the board here?
Right.
I always see that in academia, or in certain fields of different disciplines of science.
Mhm.
They're unwilling to, they've been around their own like-minded individuals for so long
Exactly.
that that's just the way it is. And when somebody else has another opinion,
Yeah.
They don't hear it.
yeah.
Or
Because
even if they have a lower degree, like I have an associate's degree in social material science,
Mhm.
and there's a person here that has a master's degree in psychology and counseling, and it's just like we bump heads a lot because she won't take my point of view.
doesn't hear you.
Yeah.
She can't hear you.
And she thinks she's like all, or that person thinks they're all it, and I'm like,
It's
me
right
too.
there in the book.
And
Yeah.
that happens in the military big time too.
Tell me about it.
And I have to remind her, like, you need to get at everybody's level. If you want to help students here on campus, you have to come down from that throne of yours,
Right.
take off your crown, and
Exactly.
be down here with us.
You're right.
She doesn't like it when I say
I think there's Albert Einstein said a similar sentiment. He said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't know what you're talking about.
that.
Exactly.
And so I kind of thought I knew something about Navajo culture until I had a son.
Now you realize you don't know anything.
I was trying to explain it to him, and I'm like, I don't know this subject well enough to explain it to him.
Yeah.
And so it took a whole lot of effort to be able to get to his level, to break it down. And I had to go back and ask my dad questions, and I think I felt safe at where I was at. I felt comfortable. And so when someone down here asked me a question, I was like, whoa, I guess I really don't know what I'm just regurgitating stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know it well enough to explain it. And then that's when I heard that quote by Einstein, you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't know it well enough. I was like, man, that's so true.
That is absolutely true. So did you find out that your dad knows everything? Or
Oh, he always says that.
does he struggle sometimes?
Oh, that's what he says. He says, because when it comes to Navajo culture, he said, I know about this much. He said, there's all this that we don't know. There's all this that our ancestors knew. He said, what we have left is what I hear and what I understand is what I hear. So he says, that's what he always says about people too. They come around trying to act like they know everything about the culture. Those are the people who really know the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
agree. Yeah, I was talking to your dad the other day. And that's what he said to me.
And he
too.
always says like different regions have different teachings, so that's why I like his dad's teaching, because there's not just one direct like solution. There's like other solutions to, because everybody has a different point of view.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's the traditional Navajo concept is flexibility.
Yeah.
Being able to incorporate new ideas and to be flexible, to keep moving
survive.
forward. Yeah.
But that's a question that you have to ask yourself as to being here. Academia forces you to learn the book or learn one thing. And I see that happening in Danae's studies also, that they're not flexible. And because there are people from different parts of the reservation have different ideas, right? Okay, now your dad admits this,
Yeah.
but there are people in Danae's studies that
Oh, I
That
come
aren't as
across it
flexible.
all the time. I come across it all the time. Like the story about when White Shell Woman recreated the 4 clans. I've come across people who absolutely believe that only 3 clans were recreated over there, not 4. And so I've talked to my dad about this, and what it is how I can best explain it is from your perspective right there, and from my perspective, we're both looking at this bottle of juice, right? I can tell you how much fat and grams and cholesterol and sodium it has by looking at it. And you go, how do you know that? Because I'm looking at it right here. Then you can see it from this
I
side,
can see, yeah.
and I can't see it from that side. But
Right.
neither one of us is wrong.
Right.
We're just seeing it from a different perspective.
Exactly.
And so it's hard for people to be flexible enough to
Right.
move around and have a holistic understanding of the
Right.
subject rather than just one discipline.
But we want one answer. We just want that one answer. There's always only one answer. Okay.
That's Western education format.
Um,
One answer has to win out. Like in science, it's either a fact or it's disproven.
Yeah.
But
It's also Eastern, so you have to be careful about
Mm.
just blaming Western. It's, yeah, okay, I understand what you're.
But if you study true science, this is one thing I always got into a big discussion about this yesterday, about flat earther and round earthers.
Oh,
For just the people who are being round earthers were being real pompous. I don't believe the earth is flat, just to say that
Sure.
right off the bat, but I took to the defense of the flat earthers and I asked a couple questions about science because they were quoting a lot of stuff. I said, you do realize that today's science is going to not be hold valid tomorrow, and tomorrow's science won't hold valid the day after.
It's true.
I said, at one point we were arguing the counter to this, that the earth was flat. The brightest minds on the earth thought the earth was flat, and you were burned at the stake. It was heresy to say the earth was round.
You're right. You're right.
And they all thought at one point, the brightest minds thought the earth was the center of the universe, the center of the solar system.
Right.
I said, then they said, it was science fiction to go to the moon. I said, every generation we get something else, or we go, so we can't
Right.
say something is definite. That's the nature of science.
That's right.
It's always changing, it's flexible.
And that's the nature of psychology. That's why I keep telling you, you know, the stuff that I know and the stuff that I'm telling you, this is old stuff. You're going to have to come up with your own decisions about these things. That's why I keep saying, you know, what we recognize as mental illnesses today, in the future, we're going to discard all this, and you're going to have to find your own. You're going to have to find your own solutions to new problems. The internet's going to cause all kinds of problems. Pornography is going to cause all kinds of problems. Video games potentially are going to cause all kinds of problems. And these are problems that we're not dealing with right now because they don't exist, or they have just started to exist. So you guys are going to have, you are the ones that are going to have to find out how to fix these things. First of all, you're going to have to identify them, and you're going to have to get us old farts to agree that that's a problem. I mean, there are still people that don't have email, that don't do anything on the internet. They have no clue about this stuff. There's shit on the internet that I have no clue about. I mean, I've got a Rosalind keeps telling me I have to do this, and this, and I have no clue what she's talking about. You know, Dr. Lerma keeps talking about Google Docs. We want to take a Google survey. What the hell is a Google survey?
I think one of the cool things about what you're talking about too, really, the self-interest colors of social judgment. I watched that Ruth Greensburg movie
Oh,
a
okay.
couple of weeks ago, and it really made me kind of think about something. I guess when you've been raised and you think a certain way, that's just normal. That when someone else does something,
Right.
you think it's abnormal.
Perverse.
It's perverse.
It's perverted.
Yeah, you think something's wrong with it.
Exactly.
And so most people, I think, walk around like that because they're comfortable. That's just the way they were
Exactly.
raised. That's the way their social circle functions. And they don't think there's anything wrong with the way they think. And I think that's the way people thought about things when they were slavery was legal.
Sure,
too.
yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having slaves. you know.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with keeping women barefoot in the kitchen. You know, there's nothing wrong with not allowing homosexuals to have the same rights. You know?
Exactly.
But then somewhere someone has to say, hey, this ain't right. Someone has to kind of be born
Exactly.
and look at it differently and say, this ain't right. I don't care what you've been brought up to believe,
Right.
but this ain't right.
But see, that's easy for us to say because we've been in the military.
Come on.
In the military, everybody around you has different ideas, and you have to adapt to all these people, and everybody has to get along because they order you to.
You're forced.
You're forced to, exactly. So you can't have racist ideas because that's not acceptable in the United States military. So it's easy for us to see this, but if you were just raised here and never left the reservation, you think this is normal and your ideas are different. And that's one of the reasons why, as a military person, coming back to the reservation, there was a degree of rejection for you
Oh, yeah.
because your ideas are different. Your backpack is different. You don't wear the right color clothes. You said, well, no, actually, you guys have the same color clothes.
You
Everybody.
know, I used to wear my combat boots my first couple of
Was
years.
that
I stopped wearing military t-shirts. I really tried to
Fit in.
find the social cues.
There we go.
It took me a long time.
Wow, this is fitting right in with what we're talking about. This is kind of exciting.
So self-interest colors our social judgment. People tend to be objective or dispassionate when they're dealing with the situation that they're involved in, of course. So, and of course, that's exactly what we're talking about as far as accepting other individuals. It's hard when the norm in this area is whatever it is to look at a different idea. It's one of the reasons why people in the South were so pissed off at people from the North who were telling them that they needed to integrate their schools. Well, in the North they had integrated schools forever, well, since 1865 or whatever. But in the South they didn't do that. And so in the South, the norm was to have segregated schools. You never mixed black and white. You never knew what was going to happen if that happened. Well, they did that up north, and they had no problem. So they tried to force their ideas on the people in the South, and the people in the South didn't accept it. So they had to force them to integrate their schools. So if you're in the environment, that's normal. Your environment is normal, and that's the normal behavior. So they wanted segregated schools in the South, and the people in the North said, you can't do this, this isn't fair to black people. And they said, tough shit. And so they still haven't really integrated their schools. What they've done is they've opened private schools and Christian schools. If you put a religious label on it, then everybody keeps their hands off of it. Nobody can say anything about that type of education. So, that's just the way it works. Self-concern motivates social behavior. People do things for their own selves, and often function to please or impress society at large. That's what they're trying to do. They want to be like everybody else. They want to be acceptable to everybody else. People are very reticent to take a stand that is different from other individuals. If the society is against homosexuality, then it would be very difficult for me to go into that society and say, you need to recognize transgender people. You need to not denigrate homosexuals, lesbians, or gay people. You shouldn't do that. It would be very difficult for me. I'd be rejected. So I wouldn't do that. It would be very difficult for me to do that. And of course, that happened in the military. For the longest time, they had the excuse that if you're gay, then it's easy for the enemy to turn you because they would use that as a leverage to make you spy for them. You think I'm kidding? Back in the 70s, this is all we were hearing about the Russians. We thought the Russians were the most god-awful people in the world. And so that's why you couldn't be gay in the military, even though there's any number of gay people that you run into all the time in the military. The idea was that if you're gay, then you can't admit it. Just don't say anything about it. And if you find out somebody was gay, you're supposed to turn them in. And then they would be boarded out of the service. I know, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense at all. They didn't know how they were going to integrate the services with gay people. Well, actually, they didn't have hardly any problems at all. There were a lot of presidents that wouldn't say anything. They wouldn't change the way that the military thought. They didn't want to go against military common thought. Well, there's a regulation. Article 37 says that you can't fraternize. It's like dogs and cats breeding. That can't happen. We can't allow that to happen. Officers are different than enlisted personnel.
There's also, under the USCMG, I worked in the brig for a while. When I was at Camp Pendleton, I volunteered to go to the security battalion. They sent Like one, two,
Why the
one,
hell
two,
would you do that?
I was bored where I was working at.
Okay.
So we got in the line, you did 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. All the ones you're going to patrols, working the gate and pulling people over. All the twos, you guys are going to the brig. I was in that group. And I learned so much about the UCMJ because there was people there for all kinds of crazy offenses. And there was a guy there for sodomy.
Oh, yeah,
And he didn't even do it with another guy, he did it with his wife.
sure,
But it was still against the rules. And it was one of the rules, the way they would kick gay people out of the military.
sure.
I was really surprised. I was like, man, this stuff is against the law. And it was with his own wife too. I was like,
If they catch somebody having sex with somebody that they're not married to, that's fornication.
yeah, fraternization. I can't remember what one is. I've seen that one too.
Yeah, fornication. And if they have sex any other way than genital sex, it's sodomy. And they can charge them with that. And
Yeah.
usually when somebody rapes somebody, they don't just charge them with rape, they charge them with sodomy and fornication.
Well, they want us to throw the book at them. And then they can plea down.
Do they go by the King James or do they do the like, does the military go based on the Bible, like
No.
a certain version of it,
No.
or just?
No, sodomy is, they have a definition. They have a specific definition for sodomy.
Well, it's in the Bible as well.
I know. And that's where it came from. Originally, that's where it came from, but they, of course, they put this in their own books.
Oh.
As stupid as that sounds, I know, the military
It was
does.
to criminalize homosexuality.
Yeah, they were trying to make sure that they could kick out gay males. Of course, this is before females were very prevalent in the military. But of course, they didn't care what the females did. They just cared what the males did.
And that's really funny because, or an interesting point because when I was in the Marines, I mean, there's gay people wherever you go, no matter what, wherever, and it's the same in the military.
Sure.
And all the branches, there's gay people. But it seems to me like there was a higher amount of open female gayness in the Marine Corps that people just accepted, looked past. You didn't even notice it, like you just,
Right.
it was there, but it was not accepted, I just ignored.
Exactly.
And it went on, but then if someone thought it was suspected of being gay, a guy was suspected of being, man, they jumped on that person.
Oh, yeah, big time.
I had a friend that was a SP, this is in Germany, and he caught a couple of women out on the flight line. Two female cops. And they were having sex. And he said, I didn't care. And this guy's the most conservative guy you can
Oh, wait.
possibly imagine. And he let these two people off, and he said, I caught gay males, and yeah, he prosecuted them. He'd arrest them. But the females, he didn't care. Strange. I don't understand why.
I always
It's
go
like-
back to that Carl Jung about
Yeah.
you don't like something in somebody.
Exactly, it's perversion, exactly.
It's something you probably in yourself. You don't like.
Yeah, and the weird part about that was that if he looked at pornography, he was looking at lesbian pornography and going, why do you find that sexual? I don't understand. But that was the kind of pornography that he liked, was gay
Well,
pornography.
I think all men. No, I don't know about you guys. All men are like that. Like.
That doesn't make